Have you ever poured your absolute heart and soul into a project, delivered just stellar results, and then watched someone else get the promotion? Yeah, it's an incredibly frustrating experience, and honestly, it really begs the question, if merit and hard work just aren't enough, what on earth is the missing piece of the puzzle? Well, today, we're going to uncover that answer. Welcome to this explainer on a fascinating concept known as executive presence, or EP. This really is the ultimate, often unspoken solution to advancing your career, taking command of your professional trajectory, and finally signaling to the world that you are, in fact, star material. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the missing link, then dive into gravitas, the core element. After that, we'll cover communication, commanding the room, followed by appearance, the first filter. And we'll wrap things up with authenticity versus conformity.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the missing link.
First things first, we really have to dispel the myth of the pure meritocracy. We need to understand what actually gets people into the corner office. We're drawing our insights today directly from Sylvia Ann Hewlett's brilliant, highly quantifiable book, Executive Presence. And I want to stress this isn't just an opinion piece. It's deeply, deeply grounded in data. Drawing on surveys of nearly 4,000 professionals and hundreds of extensive executive interviews, Hewlett identifies the true barrier for ambitious people. She argues that credentials, intelligence, and sheer performance alone, they just won't get you that next big opportunity. To cross the threshold into senior leadership, you need something slightly more intangible, but, as her research clearly shows, it's something completely measurable.
So what is it? Well, executive presence isn't about your actual skills, your quarterly numbers, or your intrinsic merit. As Hewlett perfectly puts it, it's a measure of image. It's a learned ability to broadcast your capability to others. It's basically an amalgam of qualities that telegraphs that you're in charge, or at the very least that you deserve to be. It is entirely about perception, because think about it, if people don't perceive you as a leader, your actual competence is just trapped behind a wall. And what's incredibly empowering about this whole framework is that EP is not some genetic trait you're just born with. It's a specific set of behaviors and signals that you can systematically learn, practice, and completely master.
When we break it down, executive presence actually consists of 3 universal dimensions. And this breakdown comes directly from surveys of nearly 270 senior executives who were asked what makes a true leader. Gravitas is the undeniable heavyweight here, coming in at 67%. Communication follows at 28%, and appearance, that sits at just 5%. Now, that massive disparity is absolutely crucial. It literally means you don't need to look like a supermodel or wear bespoke designer suits to have executive presence. Your primary focus, the absolute core of your leadership image, has to be built on the foundation of your gravitas.
Which brings us right to Section 2, gravitas, the core element. I really want you to ask yourself this question right now: how do you behave under fire? Because when the researchers crunched the numbers, an overwhelming 79% of female executives and 76% of male executives cited grace under fire as the absolute top marker of gravitas. I mean, we live in an era marked by constant volatility, right? Leaders are desperate for people who can project calm, steady confidence. Think about a worst-case scenario. Say a major product launch completely fails, or a sudden massive PR crisis hits your department. Do you panic? Do you start pointing fingers? Or do you take a breath, stabilize the room, and immediately pivot to a solution? If you panic, your gravitas vanishes instantly. Grace under fire proves to your colleagues that you can actually handle the immense weight of higher office. But gravitas isn't just about projecting calm confidence. It requires you to actively project a few other specific traits when the stakes are highest. You also have to be decisive. The author refers to this as showing teeth, and that just means having the fortitude to end an endless debate, make the hard call when consensus fails, and then actually stand by your decision. Next up is integrity, specifically the ability to speak truth to power. This means having the sheer courage to walk into an executive committee and tell the CEO that the new strategy is fundamentally flawed, even when it's super uncomfortable to do so. You just cannot be a yes man and have gravitas. And finally, emotional intelligence is what binds all of this together. It's your ability to read the emotional undercurrents of a room, understand what's driving your colleagues, and manage your own emotional responses under stress. Combine these traits and you build an unshakable foundation of leadership.
Moving right along to Section 3, communication, commanding the room.
Okay, this part is wild. A 2012 study of financial spokespersons revealed that persuasion relies incredibly heavily on how you sound and act rather than just what you're saying. Listen to this. Passion and voice quality combined make up a whopping 50% of your persuasive power. Voice quality means you're paying attention to your pacing, the actual timbre of your voice, and eliminating things like upspeak. Meanwhile, your actual content, the meticulously researched data, the spreadsheets, the brilliant bullet points you spent hours preparing, that matters a measly 15%. I know, this is a mind-blowing statistic, especially for highly analytical people who just naturally assume the data speaks for itself. It doesn't. Effective communication is largely about the medium. If your delivery lacks energy, authority, and conviction, your brilliance is simply going to be ignored.
So, how do you fix it? To command a room effectively, you've got to minimize distractions and execute a few specific behaviors that signal you are entirely present. First, lose the props. Shuffling papers or hiding behind 87 PowerPoint slides, that instantly signals a lack of confidence. You need to know your material cold so you can engage directly. Second, and former Credit Suisse CEO Brady Dugan noted this in the source text, nothing boosts your leadership presence more than direct eye contact. It shows you're completely focused on your audience and not easily intimidated. Third, read the room. You have to tune out your own internal nerves and watch for physical cues. Are their arms crossed? Are you getting blank stares? Listening to the subtext of the questions being asked allows you to adjust your tone in your message right there on the fly. That proves you are totally in control of the dynamic.
Now let's tackle Section 4, Appearance, the first filter.
250. That is the staggering number of milliseconds it takes for colleagues to judge your competence, your likability, and your trustworthiness based solely on your appearance. Yep, a quarter of a second. This data comes directly from research conducted by Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. So, while appearance is only 5% of the overall executive presence pie, it acts as an immediate, pass-fail first filter. If you get this wrong, you get struck off the list for promotions in a fraction of a second, long before anyone even bothers to evaluate your profound gravitas or your excellent communication skills.
The author actually learned this the hard way during a truly disastrous Oxford admissions interview early in her life. She wanted to fit in with what she assumed was the upper-crust academic look, right? So she wore a nubby tweed suit. But this suit featured a literal fox collar, complete with a tail, beady eyes, and claws. Obviously, it completely overshadowed her intellect. The admissions committee was so distracted by the dead animal draped around her neck that they simply couldn't focus on her academic potential or any of her answers. Not surprisingly, she didn't get in. It's a hilarious story, sure, but it's an incredibly powerful narrative that reminds us how the wrong look completely scrambles the message you're trying to send.
But hey, the great news here is that appearance is highly actionable. You just need to make sure your grooming and attire don't steal attention away from your actual skills. Being polished matters far, far more than intrinsic physical beauty. You just want to minimize visual distractions, whether that means overly tight clothing, unkempt hair, or loud, flashy accessories. The entire goal of this 5% is to ensure your appearance points the audience directly toward your professional competencies, not away from them. And interestingly enough, the rules do bend over time. Once you've proven yourself and established your bona fides, your deep gravitas, you buy yourself greater latitude. Think about Steve Jobs. He didn't start his career wearing that signature casual black turtleneck. He played the game, he proved his undeniable value, and then he earned the right to make his own sartorial rules.
Which brings us to our final section, authenticity versus conformity. We really need to look at the corporate landscape objectively because it presents a pretty stark reality. According to the text data, straight white men currently represent 88% of corner offices. And because they hold the vast majority of those leadership positions, they naturally establish the baseline code for what executive presence historically looks and sounds like. Meanwhile, women and minorities often face a distinct hurdle that the author calls a double whammy. Not only do they have to mold themselves to a corporate culture like any other employee, but the data actually shows that 41% of professionals of color feel impelled to compromise their authenticity to conform to a standard that simply doesn't reflect their background. It is a heavy, documented tax on a person's energy and productivity. So how do you navigate this? Balancing conformity with your true identity definitely takes time and strategy. First, you have to figure out your non-negotiables. What are the core parts of your cultural or personal identity that you absolutely will not compromise? Figure that out first. Second, seek air cover. This means finding senior leaders or sponsors who are going to vouch for you, champion your capabilities, and protect you when you step out to assert your unconventional ideas or unique perspective. Third, leverage the diversity dividend. In our globalized economy, your unique background gives you insights into underserved markets and blind spots that your homogeneous colleagues might completely miss. That is a massive asset to a company. And finally, play the long game. As your gravitas grows and your track record solidifies, you earn the capital and the right to stand out more fully as your authentic self.
This quote perfectly captures the story of Judith Harrison, an employee who bravely walked away from an office that was flying a Confederate flag. It brilliantly illustrates the absolute importance of knowing those non-negotiables we just talked about. Sometimes, a culture simply does not align with your core values, and no amount of conforming is worth the internal cost. If conforming puts your soul in play or compromises your core integrity to the point of distress, you have to know when to walk away. Because ultimately, true, lasting gravitas cannot be faked. It rests entirely on a foundation of your authentic identity.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take a moment to reflect on your own image filters and ask yourself, are you truly signaling your star material to the world? Are you projecting grace under fire when things inevitably go wrong? Are you commanding the room with your delivery, knowing full well that the data alone just won't save you? Are you minimizing visual distractions so your competence can actually shine? Remember, mastering executive presence isn't about changing who you are at your core. It's about systematically removing the static so the world can see you for the capable, stellar professional you truly are. So what kind of presence are you projecting? Start curating that presence today and take control of your career trajectory.